Hi, everyone. Welcome to another podcast. And today's guest is Felix Neals. Welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate being here. I look forward to speaking with you.
I am so grateful that you've made time out of your busy schedule to speak with us. I know the people of Snohomish and surrounding areas would like to hear about who the new face on the council is, but more really as to who you are and your interests and how you find yourself being part of Snohomish. So
Indeed.
why don't you just launch into it?
Well, thank you. Yes, I've been in the city for about 4 years. I am excited about my involvement in the community. I've been in the state about 10 years, originally up in the Bellingham area. And as my job moved further south, I moved further south along with the job. We found Snohomish just by chance, as many do, by coming here for some of the activities that Snohomish offers so richly, and ended up really feeling like this is a place that feels very synonymous with things that we also enjoy: proximity to water, a very good small town feel, and being able to get involved in activities communally. So it's led us to being here, and volunteerism is a strong part of how I show up. So for me, the city council position is a continuum of that.
So how are you going to utilize, I guess I should tell the audience that you have a background as a mental health practitioner, among many things that I have read. And how are you going to bring that to helping Snohomish understand your point of view as a council member?
Yes, thank you for asking that. Mental health and wellness are so important right now societally. There is no way to provide the appropriate level of perspective for how important that actually is. Part of what needs to, for me, happen in terms of what I can provide is to then try and insert places where we can create safe spaces, psychological safety.
Ooh, yeah.
Partly what's missing a lot right now is connectedness for people, most people, because they're not able to connect with others as they might have in churches or in other areas where we could gather. The way that we can help to bridge that gap is in two ways. The city itself has a role to play in terms of helping to provide continuously the support that people need. But with my background, what I hope to provide is a regular rhythm of contact from the city that says we're here, we care, we're connected, and we're listening for how we can continue to be helpful to you. So that's what I hope to do initially.
Well, that sounds fabulous. So it's nice to have someone come into the council that has another aspect and another point of view to bring to the mix. That's wonderful. One of the things that I did read that you feel like is a strong component is your listening skills. So with that said, we have such a huge issue with being such a lovely small town, but we are now restricted with the COVID and the ongoing, I guess I should say. So your active participation as a council member and a mental health practitioner is going to be quite interesting to watch. Personally, I think that's going to be a great thing for the city.
Well, thank you. And you spoke of listening skills, and I definitely want to spotlight that as something that'll be really important. Part of the way that things show up for many people is oftentimes, as I've observed what's happened with how this city interacts with people, is that ultimately they know that the city has decisions to make, but they also want to know that the city has heard what their concerns are, and that even if there's not a place in, let's say, their current budget cycle, that there may be a place for something moving forward. And the way that you do that is by reflecting back to people what they say is important to them, and reflecting back to them how that may fit in with what these city's values and principles, projects, et cetera, are already kind of situated. And then providing for them some way for them to know how those decisions get made as transparently as we can. So listening means reflecting back that we are actively aware of what matters to a person, but doing that in a way in which we say, we can't make promises or there's no magic, but there is certainly a way that constructively we can try to come together and figure out what the best path forward is, knowing that whatever is rising to the top from the standpoint of priorities and the standpoint of constituency is being duly considered. So I hope to bring those skills there and let people know that they're being heard.
So with that, I also am going to pick a little bit out of the Tribune article back on October 28th. Your verbiage on the next normal. What does that mean for people and how you are going to integrate into the town?
So the next normal is an interesting place. It's an interesting concept. It refers in a couple of different ways to some of the new realities that we're going to be facing. People that may have had to travel to work on a regular basis who may now be able to work, as I am, remotely for some portion of the week, if not the whole week, means that there are people who will be in town more than traveling in some cases. And it also means that as we're adjusting to what it means, if anyone that's been downtown lately sees the tents and things that we have running along First Street or other places, that means that there's a different way in which we're going to have to try to approach what it means to enter a business, operate in a business, how people will have to kind of give some grace to move through town with masks and other things like that. I don't see that that is going to go away anytime soon. And the next normal, in some ways, is the normalization of the fact that the pandemic has necessitated different ways of thinking about societal norms, physical distancing, which I use as opposed to social distancing, because physical distancing is the mandate. Social distancing is more of a construct. But those are the things that are really important, I think, for when we think of the next normal. It's that there's going to be a different rhythm for people that may be able to get out and shop during the middle of the day that couldn't have done that because, like in my case, my office is in Seattle, but I find that I'm here at least 2 or 3 days a week. I can run and do things now that I haven't been able to do before. Are all the shops that typically are closed on Monday, should they be open on Monday? I don't know. But I think that we have to just try and cut a balance, create a balance, and try and figure out kind of together what that looks like.
Well, that knowing what we're all up against and how it feels, I guess watching that play out and how people are going to adjust. But that's, you know, it is a good thing to, so to speak, wrap your head around, because it is changing. Everything has changed. So do you practice as a mental health practitioner in Seattle, or is that another part of business or things that you do?
So most of the clients that I've had have been in the Seattle area. Although there is some consideration maybe for being here now that I am here. Before I was there, so it made more sense to kind of be there. But now the other nuance, of course, is that we have virtualized even the provision of this service. So part of what I do now can be done kind of anywhere, and there are a host of different applications available to mental health counselors and therapists, et cetera, to use that have started to normalize what it means. I do have some concern about the experience. I think experientially being in the presence of someone when you're trying to navigate issues relating to mental health, sometimes being in person is a better way to work through and navigate issues. However, the technology is moving along very quickly now. And what is a concept I use in human resources, which is micro-learning, meaning that there's opportunities for people to consume things in shorter chunks as long as you have very concise ways of delivering it. I think similarly we'll see themes in mental health counseling that allows there to be different and more innovative ways of how we deliver mental health counseling services vis-a-vis a manner like the one we're using now, for example.
So the fatigue that we're all seeing in our city, in our friends, in our life in general, when you talk about bringing things together and being able to maybe go out and shop at different times. How are you going to help people understand what the safety valve is? Do I go out and do I also have lunch? Do I, as a council member again, but also as a mental health practitioner, they're going to look to you for some sort of guidance under that.
Indeed.
That it's fearful. People are afraid of a lot of what they can't put their finger on.
Indeed, they are. And you mentioned a couple of different things that I'll unpack and deal with individually. One was the fatigue. One was their ability to feel safe when they're out. And the other is what will they actually be able to do? So I'll kind of take those in order.
Right.
Fatigue is a very, very, that concept is one for which there are other tools I am using currently in my other position, which is around models of self-care and how we give ourselves the ability to try and identify what the triggers are, and then to be able to work through it in a way in which we make space for the fatigue. I think that as we start to kind of, as I referred to earlier, normalize what it means to be able to have the pandemic as kind of woven into the fabric of how we operate, I think we'll see a decrease in that being something that is so foreign to us that we really don't know what to do about it. There is, of course, talk about the two different vaccines that are at their 93 and 95% rate of success in terms of addressing the coronavirus. And that may help for some people to get around the sense of fear, which is part of what the fatigue is through. And I won't unpack that too much more, but the fatigue comes from generally from feelings of things like hopelessness or anxiety, traumatic experiences, which in some cases can be vicarious because someone we care for has been harmed or has contracted the virus, or to us personally. So fatigue is kind of an overall descriptor of all these other underlying things that when you try to help people identify for themselves vis-a-vis a self-care approach, then we help to alleviate those things. We can't make them go away because fatigue and anxiety and trauma and some of these other things existed before COVID, but they've been heightened by the fact that we now have a spotlight on the things we cannot do. So that's one thought I have about that. The way the city could be helpful, of course, is to have more things like more visual reminders of things, identifying in terms of what the city is trying to do with regard to signage and things that we have on our website, which is one of the things I'm starting to think through and starting to try and see what's possible. And notifications, the city has a lot of different opportunities in terms of how we have a touch with with all of the residents. I heard a number in the last council meeting that there's something like 70,000 people that come through the city in any given year. So the idea of what kind of impact we have beyond the borders of Snohomish for people that somehow have an impact on Snohomish because they come in, and then there's those of us that live here. So that's some quick thoughts there. With regard to what people can do to feel safe when they're out, I think that it would be interesting or helpful to, other than the guidance we get from the governor or from the Department of Health, is to see if there's, I volunteered with the Historic Downtown Snohomish Association. I was the secretary there as one of the positions I had before. And so there are mechanisms we can use to get other information out. So part of my other thinking was the other boards or commissions or other aspects, associations through which we can start to disseminate other information, working with business owners to help them spotlight things by way of different ways of helping people understand. As long as we're careful about what we do and maintain the rules, we have shown that that's a safe way to approach things. Wear the mask, keep your 6 feet or 3 meters, depending on where you're from, of distance.
You're right.
And generally speaking, that has shown from an efficacy standpoint that everything is going to be generally fine. And if you're in a category of being kind of compromised, then going out is something that one has to consider, or the way in which one goes out, or the time in which one goes out. As a final note there, I'll say that some rules around stores that were saying, you know, if you're a senior or a compromised immune system, hours of operation just for that group of people. That's another thing I'd like to potentially reintroduce if we continue to see this rise in numbers. So those are some initial thoughts.
That's an excellent thought. I mean, that makes sense. And it would make people feel safer.
I think so. I
On
hope
that
so.
note,
Mhm.
we've gone just quickly before we say our adieus. What do you find most interesting or that you like the most about Snohomish? Just as a personal thing.
Personally, I have found that I was really amazed by how quickly people kind of adapted to, in a welcoming way, just making us feel as if we were part of the community. Myself and my wife, when we first came to the town, there were certain things we saw that we could potentially do to be involved, and we were welcomed. And we found that, and we live within walking distance of First Street. And so just getting out and walking and having that good experience and being able to, in almost a quasi-familial way, have people be supportive, felt like there were some really wonderful things happening here that we really wanted to be a part of. And even in the way where it's just feels like a very friendly kind of engagement. I found that those are things that from the time we moved here before to now continue to ring true for us. And we continue to be inspired by seeing how people also try to help each other. So that's, as a final note on that point, what I would say makes it feel good about living in Snohomish.
That is excellent, but I'm going to guess the mirror reflects the other way also. It just sounds that way. Hey everybody, if you have enjoyed this video and you've seen some of the others, please give it a like and be sure to subscribe to the channel for future interviews that are coming up and learn more about the local practitioners you live around and with here in Snohomish. Thanks.